joining us for today's webinar, P-EBT 2.0, co-hosted by the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, the Education Trust, Feeding America, FRAC, and Share Our Strengths. During this webinar, you will learn about the recently released guidance on pandemic EBT from USDA's Food and Nutrition Service and hear from 3 states about their experience with P-EBT last school year, lessons learned, and what they're thinking about for the next phase. We have a fantastic slate of speakers lined up. First, we will have Cindy Long, Deputy Administrator of Child Nutrition Programs, Ed Harper, Director of the Office of Program Integrity for Child Nutrition Programs, and Rogelio Carrasco, Program Analyst at USDA's Food and Nutrition Service, share more about the new guidance and walk through a few points in response to common questions they are getting from states. After their presentation, we will hear from Amanda Harrison, Director of the Office of Child Nutrition at the West Virginia Department of Education, Rob Leshin, Director of the Office for Food and Nutrition Programs at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and Bill Diudu, Associate Commissioner for Eligibility Operations, and Sarah Harney, Senior Project Manager at the Texas Health and Human Services Commission. They will share their state's P-EBT story, lessons learned, and what they've been thinking about for P-EBT 2.0. Before I turn it over to USDA, I thought it might be helpful to start with a quick overview of P-EBT to make sure everyone is on the same page. P-EBT was created in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act in March 2020 and provides an EBT card to children who are missing school meals due to school closures so they can purchase food at retailers that accept SNAP. All 50 states and the District of Columbia and the Virgin Islands created and implemented a P-EBT program for the 2019-2020 school year. Some states amended their P-EBT plans to provide benefits to children missing meals due to school start delays, school closures, or virtual learning for August and September this school year. We were thrilled when Congress included an extension and expansion of P-EBT in the CR passed in September. The CR extends P-EBT through fiscal year 2021, provides benefits to children who have a reduction in the number of days or hours they are physically in school or childcare, allows states to use simplifying assumptions to establish benefit levels and eligibility periods for eligible children, allows state agencies to provide benefits to children who receive SNAP and are in childcare and have experienced a facility closure, reduced attendance, or hours due to the pandemic, allows Puerto Rico and other territories to implement P-EBT, and provides funding to cover all states' administrative costs. On November 16th, USDA released guidance for P-EBT 2.0. Guidance just addresses the development and approval of P-EBT plans for school children and does not include children in childcare. Given that, today's webinar will just focus on providing benefits to school-age children for this school year. And with that, I will turn it over to our panelists from USDA.
Thank you, Etienne. This is Cindy Long, and I just want to first say that the USDA team is really happy to be here today. We really appreciate all the support that all of the wide range of folks on this call have provided to us and to the states in implementing P-EBT last school year, this past fall. And we look forward to going forward under the revised FY21 statutory language and continuing to work with you all. I'm just going to make a few general points and then quickly hand it over to the P-EBT team to get into the real specifics. They're the real experts. First of all, as was just mentioned, we are operating in FY21 under new language for P-EBT, different language than what we operated under last school year. One of the major differences, as was mentioned, is that the current language includes childcare-age children, whereas previously P-EBT was only available for school-age children. We have released guidance for the current year for school-age children, and our discussion today is going to focus on that population. Because the child care portion of the statute raises some new issues, we are working very hard on guidance for that population, and are hoping to have that out as soon as we possibly can. Another important revision to the new FY21 language is the addition of language that allows states flexibility to use simplifying assumptions and the best feasibly available data. We know that this language was included in order to help make the program simpler to operate, particularly in the current environment where school circumstances are more varied than they were last year. We are absolutely committed to implementing this change language to help ease program administration as much as we possibly can, while also ensuring that we are executing the program consistent with the requirements of the statutes in its entirety. We appreciate your support on this as we continue to take this approach in our guidance and as we evaluate state plans. Last, I want to just acknowledge and thank so many of you for the input that you provided as we were developing our guidance for FY21. We really did take everything we heard into careful consideration. One of the messages we heard a number of times was the need for clarity and consistency and transparency in our guidance. Again, I want to assure you we are trying very hard to take that input, and our recently posted public guidance was certainly more detailed than our original P-EBT guidance this fall, and we hope that is helpful. We are going to continue to try to be as clear and transparent as we possibly can, while also acknowledging that there will be some circumstances where we're going to need to assess a state plan in the particular context of that state's specific circumstances. And as such, in some cases, we will need to tailor our response to a state in its particular circumstances. So with that introduction, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ed Harper to talk about some of the more specific issues.
This is Ed. Thanks, Cindy. Actually, we're going to start with Rogelio, and then I'll pick up in a few minutes.
Yep. Yeah, so this is Rogelio, and we're going to go over some of the common questions that we've heard from states after we issued the guidance that Cindy was talking about. Again, these are just recurring themes that we've seen in some of the questions. First, when may a state calculate and issue average P-EBT benefits for school children who are otherwise eligible to receive free or reduced priced NSLP meals? A state can calculate average benefits for children with mixed in-person and virtual schedules only. Children who attend school 100% in person and benefit from a meal service at the school are ineligible for a P-EBT. Children with 100% virtual schedules should receive P-EBT benefits for every school day. The state must make the case in their P-EBT plans that their average benefit, so for a school district, a county, or a state, is a reasonable reflection of the actual average of virtual days for children in that area. Another question that we get frequently is, some children attend school in person for a couple hours per day, others for half a day. May these children receive P-EBT benefits on those days? So generally, children who are eligible for free or reduced NSLP meals are eligible for P-EBT benefits on days that they do not have access to a meal service at school. USDA understands that children may attend school in person for just part of the school day for a variety of reasons. These include receiving special instruction or simply taking advantage of the school's internet services. In some of these cases, schools may offer children a bagged lunch to take home, but not a meal service at school. USDA cannot provide specific instruction to states to cover all possible situations. Instead, USDA points to P-EBT statutory language, which recognizes that states will make simplifying assumptions to carry out the broader purpose of the legislation. USDA expects states to use their discretion in these cases to ensure that eligible children who do not have access to a meal service at school receive P-EBT benefits. So, another question that we get frequently: do schools still need to be closed for 5 consecutive days for a student to receive P-EBT benefits? Well, in the spring, a school had to be closed for at least 5 consecutive days for a student to receive benefits. Under the revised standard, the school has to be closed or operating at reduced attendance or hours for 5 consecutive days. Note 5 consecutive days does not need to be Monday through Friday. Any period of 5 consecutive school days will qualify, such as Wednesday through Tuesday, where you have an intervening weekend. It is best to think of the 5 consecutive days as a school level rather than a student level requirement. Once the school meets the minimum 5 consecutive day threshold, free or reduced priced eligible children are eligible to receive P-EBT benefits on days that they do not attend school in person and do not have access to a meal service at the school due to COVID-19. Here's another question that we get frequently. Can a state issue benefits retrospectively? Are there constraints on the issuance of benefits to children? A state may issue all benefits retrospectively if it prefers. For example, a state may choose to issue benefits for December in January and issue January benefits in February. States are not required to issue benefits prospectively. However, if the state wishes to provide benefits prospectively, the state may only determine benefit levels 2 months in advance. The P-EBT authorizing statute is effective through the end of the federal fiscal year, so all benefits must be issued by September 30th, 2021. Other questions we get involve student absences. What about student absences? How should states handle absences when determining P-EBT benefit levels? Well, USDA expects that states will calculate and issue P-EBT benefits based on children's planned or approved schedules, not their attendance records. An approved schedule might be every other day in person, 1 week in person followed by 1 week at home, etc. A student's approved schedule will likely be the state's best feasibly available data for purposes of calculating P-EBT benefit levels. USDA does not expect states to adjust schedule data for occasional school absences. So those are the questions I'm going to go through, and I'm going to hand the baton off to my colleague, Ed.
All right, thank you. So just continuing with this, are regularly scheduled holidays and breaks eligible days for P-EBT? No, in short. Regularly scheduled holidays and breaks are not P-EBT eligible days. However, if a school extends a planned school break due to the current health emergency, then those are COVID-related school closures. Like any other COVID-related closure, those are P-EBT eligible days for the children who are otherwise eligible for free or reduced price NSLP meals. Another question we get. Some school districts will collect free and reduced price meal applications specifically for the purpose of establishing children's eligibility for P-EBT benefits. This includes applications from new students, such as kindergartners, and students from households that were not eligible for free or reduced price meals in school year 2019-2020. Since many school districts did not collect applications at the start of this school year and will only request applications after the state launches its P-EBT program, will approved applicants' P-EBT eligibility begin at the time of application approval, or will it apply back to the beginning of the current school year? So states and school districts may make reasonable simplifying assumptions to determine when a new applicant became eligible. For example, it may be appropriate for states and school districts to assume eligibility back to the start of the school year for applications processed in the month after a state announces its P-EBT program, as many schools were not actively taking applications previously. At the same time, it would not be reasonable for a state or school district to assume a student was eligible back to the start of the school year for households who submit school meal applications significantly after households were made aware of P-EBT and the need to apply for school meal benefits to determine eligibility. States must describe how they will handle this in their state P-EBT plans. Next question we get. If a state is prohibited from requiring their school districts to provide student schedule information to the state, may the state require households to submit an application that asks households to attest to their children's school schedules? USDA strongly encourages states to gather school schedule data from school districts rather than require households to fill out an application. However, states may use an application that asks households to provide their student schedules if the state cannot gather that data from school districts. States' experience with P-EBT from the spring and summer makes clear that the introduction of a household application is an administrative burden that will prevent some eligible children from receiving benefits. If a state cannot require school districts to submit student schedule data, but the school districts can provide that information at their option, USDA recommends that states encourage school districts to provide that data. Note that states that rely on a household application to establish children's school schedules must still match all children's names to state or school district free and reduced price eligibility lists to confirm their current enrollment and their eligibility for P-EBT benefits. States that propose to use a household application must include a copy of the application with their proposed state plan. USDA will provide states with an appropriate disclaimer to place above the applicant's signature. Another question we get, how will states be held accountable for problems with program implementation? Each state must operate P-EBT in accordance with its approved P-EBT plan. USDA is responsible for oversight of states' management of P-EBT and may hold a state agency liable for overall program operations that do not conform to its approved plan. For example, USDA may hold state agencies liable for aggregate overissuances or improper payments in situations where USDA determines that such action is merited based on the nature of the error that gave rise to the overissuance, the size of the error, and whether such action would advance program purposes. This is the same standard that applies to all other state agency administered USDA nutrition assistance programs. USDA's oversight activities will focus on systemic issues rather than individual eligibility determinations or benefit issuances. I have a few more questions here. These are some that Etienne forwarded from the, I guess from some of you on the phone call. First question we got, can you outline who's eligible for P-EBT 2.0 who are not eligible during the first round? The big changes to P-EBT, as Etienne mentioned previously, were the extension of P-EBT to certain children in childcare and eligible children in the territories. But given that we're focused on the school component of P-EBT today, let me focus on that for a minute. For children in school, the basic eligibility standards are the same. Specifically, eligibility for free or reduced price NSLP meals and the lack of access to those meals at school. What's different is that the revised statutory language makes clear that children may be without access to meals at school because the school is closed, as was the case in the spring, or because the school is operating at reduced capacity or hours. Because all schools were effectively closed in the spring, the population eligible for P-EBT is no broader now than it was in the spring. But the change in the statutory language is better suited for the current school year than the original P-EBT language would have been. It ensures that children who are eligible for free or reduced price meals but do not have access to a meal service at school are not denied P-EBT benefits, even if the school offers some in-person instruction. The next question we got. My state missed a number of children eligible for P-EBT and has expressed interest in trying to get benefits to those missed children. Is there any flexibility if a state formally requests an amendment to their plan? This is actually a question that's covered in the question and answer document that USDA posted to its website on November 16th. Let me just read that real quickly. That question was, can states issue benefits to school children who were covered by their approved P-EBT plans but were missed or issued too small a benefit due to state error? The answer to that is yes. States with approved P-EBT plans for school year 1920 or the beginning of school year 2021 can issue new or corrected P-EBT benefits to children who were covered by the state's approved plans but did not receive benefits or received too small a benefit due to state error. What I would add here is that it's true that USDA is no longer accepting amendments to plans from the spring of 2020. However, as long as the children who were missed were intended to be served under the terms of the state's approved plan, there's no reason for a plan amendment. Next question we got from Frack. If a child did not receive a P-EBT card in the spring of 2020, how do they go about receiving one in 2021? Well, as was the case with virtually all state P-EBT plans in the spring, states and school districts will identify and reach out to families of children who are eligible for P-EBT benefits. It is possible, as it was in the spring, that some households will be asked by their states to provide additional information to establish an EBT account. But state P-EBT plans should make that as easy as possible for households. USDA is also encouraging states to outline a process in their P-EBT plans to allow families who believe that they were missed by the state or their school district to contact the state and inquire about their eligibility. That's the list of questions I have. Let me just turn it back to our host. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. That was very informative. We really appreciate it and really appreciate your partnership as we work to implement P-EBT for this school year. Now I want to turn it over to Amanda Harrison from West Virginia to give an overview of what they did this past spring and summer, some lessons learned, and what they're thinking about for the next round. Amanda?
Great, thank you so much. The West Virginia P-EBT team learned a lot in the spring, and we're going to share a little bit about what we learned and talk about some of the main ideas that we see for 2.0, as well as the challenges that we are encountering as we seek to develop a plan. So during what we'll call West Virginia P-EBT 1.0, some of the things that we had in our corner as we developed our program was that we had a pre-existing interagency data sharing agreement. So with our Department of Health and Human Resources, we already had an established relationship and partnership, as well as systems that, quote unquote, talk to each other nightly. So we were able to take a direct issuance approach, which was a much more streamlined process for our families. West Virginia is predominantly CEP, so we knew that this benefit was going to impact a large amount of our students. So to give you an idea, last school year, West Virginia had about 265,000 students enrolled in public school. So just through that process alone, we were able to reach about 230,000 of those students who, attend a CEP district or attend a CEP school, and by the COVID closures, were able to receive P-EBT. So we knew that this was going to have a large impact in our state, which, compared to other states, has a low enrollment. So here's what worked for us and some lessons learned that we think would be helpful to replicate in future P-EBT implementations. So we created a dedicated customer service line for inquiries. It was really a chaotic time for our state, as it was every other state, but a lot of people needed a lot of information all at the same time. So to have a hotline, a number dedicated that could be broadcast consistently, that folks could call for inquiries about P-EBT, that was really important to us, and it kept us very busy, but it worked. We crafted a web page and updated it regularly with important information, and we communicate with our key partners regularly. So we were having weekly meetings, and we maintained that level of communication throughout the duration of the project. And we, even when P-EBT 1.0 concluded, we continued to meet regularly because we wanted to debrief and we wanted to document our experience, and we wanted to go ahead and plan, even before guidance was issued, what we would do better if given the opportunity. So we did also have a claims dispute process. We used an agreement that we have with an existing vendor. We received over 10,000 support tickets, and every one of those received a response because I have an amazing team. And as you can see here on my slide, I said it's very important if you get a hold of a team that can function on little to no sleep. That's going to be a theme moving forward. So we obviously have general challenges and concerns as we move forward in P-EBT 2.0. One of the things that we're encountering is that creating content that is clear and understandable for our general public is going to be very difficult. So you heard from the USDA team, which did a great job laying out the guidance. And, if you work in that world very regularly, there's a lot of federal jargon, and we're going to have to, essentially translate that so that our public can have that information provided in a clear and a consistent guideline. And to do that, we're going to have to really dig in through the layers and be able to put that in multiple formats. So one of the things we're doing is working with a training vendor, and we're actually going to be creating some animated training videos so that we can put those on social media and on the website and get that going viral, because we know that folks learn in a variety of formats, and so we are very fortunate to have that vendor who's going to be doing that for us. The fluctuating circumstances that are going to impact benefit levels, whether or not a district is open or closed, and tracking those scenarios, that's got chaos written all over it. And so to be able to track that, we're very concerned. So we're going to have to educate our districts, we're going to have to educate our sponsors that have operated the National School Lunch Program, and we're just going to have to be very clear and transparent about what those expectations are. Making those simplified assumptions that provide access to benefits in a quick and efficient manner, you know, the more we dive into this, the more complicated it becomes. And so we're looking for ways that are not necessarily shortcuts, but pathways that make this as simple as possible. So we're grateful for that opportunity included in the guidance, but we're struggling to find just how simple we can make something that's so incredibly complicated. We're obviously concerned with the unknowns of the child care implementation. We're grateful that this documentation and these guidance pieces were released early so we could go ahead and get a jump start on at least the school-age population, but we're still concerned with how we're going to be able to manage the child care piece, so we're anxiously awaiting that as well. And of course, as a state agency and anybody who's doing anything in the age of COVID, you know that managing this on top of an already staggering workflow is a heavy lift. So those are some general concerns that we have moving forward. So we are going to, again, struggle to collect the data, communicate it with our sponsors, with our districts. We're going to do the best we can, but it's going to be a lot of teach, reteach along the way. You know, we're very concerned with this idea of state agency liability for issuances, or over issuances rather. It's comforting to hear from USDA that perhaps they would be looking at more of your systemic issues, the things that create, you know, huge red flags in any type of audit scenario. But we want to do our best. And again, with a complicated program that has multiple scenarios in terms of open and closures and all of that, we're just very concerned that it does lend itself to be very error prone. Before in P-EBT 1.0, we were operating with more of a level playing field in terms of our state was consistently shut down. So when it came time to determine benefit levels and submit a plan for approval to USDA, it was very consistent for the most part amongst who was eligible and how much.
So Amanda's having connection issues, so we will turn it over to Rob, and then we can come back to Amanda for just a final, her final remarks at the end of the presentation. Rob?
Okay, I hope you can still hear me. I'm having some connection issues too.
Yes,
and at the
we
end,
can hear you.
Perfect. If you can advance a slide for me. I only have 2 slides anyways. Good afternoon, everyone. I like to see the pandemic EBT 2.0 because certainly with P-EBT 1.0, that's where here in Massachusetts and all state agencies were able to kind of work the kinks out as this was the first time operationalizing this program. I think there's a lot of lessons learned here in Massachusetts between the 2 state agencies, especially the SNAP agency, the Mass Department of Transitional Assistance, and the Child Nutrition Agency, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We were able to kind of work through a lot of different challenges related to collecting the student eligibility information and also challenges related to collecting information on the types of learning models at the schools, as well as communication. So first and foremost, in terms of lesson learned, we found that there was some challenges to get current and up-to-date school operating model information as to whether they were hybrid, remote learning, and especially in that 5 consecutive days. Like most states, it was a sort of a slippery status that can change based on health factors. So we worked to sort of get the latest up-to-date information as possible so that we can issue benefits correctly. So that was something ultimately that we ended up figuring out that we were going to have to get and survey schools and get that information as the closest date as possible prior to issuance, that we can ensure that they were done correctly. In terms of household questions, that was certainly a big thing. I guess we took it. I want to say we took it for granted, but inherently, pandemic EBT is a complicated thing. It gets complicated when you're talking about issuing hundreds of thousands of cards, and the student eligibility. There's multiple criteria to it. It isn't just that the student is free and reduced price. There's that school status and CEP. So there's a lot of different kind of criteria that makes it, I guess, inherently challenging. So definitely for states having a robust plan to answer household questions, that's certainly something that we started to develop as we went through. I think the household communication, regarding the school meal status was certainly a complication that we kind of worked through at the front end of it. In Massachusetts and all states, there's the option to continue the summer meal program and meals being free, which for school meals, there's no need right now for a school meal application or direct certification process for school meals. So we had to kind of work out the kinks with schools to ensure that they understood to keep open the household school meal application, as well as the direct certification process, and continuing to directly certify kids, specifically to ensure we are capturing newly eligible students for pandemic EBT. So we worked on messaging. We worked on kind of updating letters that goes out to households for direct certification exact matches, letters that went out to households for approval letters for free meal applications that were approved, and kind of really teasing out the concept to not confuse the household that yes, you are being approved for free meals, and you were directly certified for free meals, and kind of making sure that they sort of understood that process. So importantly, we needed to ensure that school districts were continuing, specifically for pandemic EBT. The other opportunity that we found was, like anything else, there's always opportunities to promote SNAP, and whether it was on the household letter notifications, pandemic P-EBT letter notifications, as well as, we made some updates to the letters to households for school meal applications, as well as the direct certification exact match notification letters as well, to always find areas to indicate to households that if you're not currently on SNAP, however, you're eligible for free meals, but if you're not currently on SNAP or you're eligible for pandemic EBT, here's the pathway to apply for SNAP benefits. And we found through this year, through the pandemic EBT exercise as well, another opportunity, because in Massachusetts we had a fair amount of people who were P-EBT and who are P-EBT eligible but not on SNAP. So we want to make sure that that people understand what the program is and that they do have a pathway to potentially receive benefits through SNAP. Bettina, if you can go to the next slide, please. And so in terms of our plan highlights for what actually we just submitted to USDA, in Massachusetts, the majority of our schools are continuing with the summer meal program. And by doing so, the eligibility for all of the students in those schools from last year, from school year 1920, for school meal purposes / P-EBT purposes, is still good. So we're really using last year's or school year 1920's student eligibility lists as sort of the starting point for our issuance this year. So we're looking at sort of the student eligibility as from last year. We're reviewing the current list of CEP in Provision 2 schools, of which we did have some expansion of CEP, at least in terms of our approvals, and we are counting those schools that would have been in CEP, that all those students would get a pandemic EBT card. So starting at the starting point, last year's school year 19-20 eligibility data, we're then removing students no longer at the school or graduated, and working with school districts to now reconnect them and say, okay, all of these students that you have found newly eligible or approved for free reduced price meals by way of the paper applications or direct certification, those students now can be added to the 2021 list of pandemic EBT lists. So I guess we're hoping that if the plan is approved, we're hoping that this sort of methodology is simpler than our last year's go around with schools that now have at least a couple of repetitions of this, and they can now look at last year's eligibility data, specifically the 90% of schools that are in either a seamless summer or a summer food service program where the eligibility is paused and is still valid this year, and then start doing that plus or minus exercise with students that are no longer at the school or are newly eligible. So hopefully that sort of exercise is a lot simpler, and especially now that they know how the program works. We're also utilizing or taking advantage of the simplified assumption piece, because in Massachusetts it's a good split, between hybrid and remote. There's hardly any school districts that are in person, and even within the schools, in a hybrid school, it's not a case where every single hybrid model is the same, and sometimes even by grade levels are the same in the 2,000 plus schools. So we're really trying to look for a simplified method for issuance for the hybrid versus the fully remote, utilizing a 1 month period and a full remote in terms of number of operating days that we think that makes sense for a full remote school, based on 5 days per week in a month, as well as the number of school operating days that we feel is most likely the average for a hybrid. So we're trying to take a simplified approach to that. So that is the highlights of our current plan.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Now I want to turn it over to Bill and Sarah.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. My name is Bill Diuto. I'm Associate Commissioner with Eligibility Operations with the Texas Health and Human Services Commission, and I'll be presenting along with Sarah Harney, Senior Project Manager. I will start off, and first off, I want to thank USDA, FNS, and the Food Research and Action Center for the opportunity to present today and share some of our journey from last spring as Texas implemented P-EBT along with every other state at the beginning of the pandemic. Multiple challenges in terms of dealing with historic application volumes in the month of April as we're ramping up to do this. So from a logistical standpoint, there was a lot. I'm sure every state was dealing with that concurrently with trying to implement a unprecedented response. And so we'll share with you today what we learned and a little bit about what we're planning to do for a 2.0 response. So just a little background, we served as the lead agency for implementing the pandemic EBT along with our two partner agencies, the Texas Education Agency and the Texas Department of Agriculture. We had daily project meetings as part of the ramp up and implementation that included not only our HHSC internal teams with IT, policy, operations, and but then a daily call that included the TEA and TDA all the way through the implementation as well, to ensure collaboration and constant communication to address any issues that came up. We anticipated in looking at the data, and to give you the size and scope of what Texas, what we were facing, we estimated about 3.6 million children would be eligible for pandemic EBT. 40% were current SNAP households and 60% eligible non-SNAP households. The benefit that was determined in the spring was $285 based on the number of days that the schools were closed times the 570 per day. The additional challenge is, as part of the implementation in Texas, we have over 1,200 school districts, and so we'll talk through some of the communication strategies we used as we get towards the end of the presentation. I'm going to turn it over now to Sarah to walk through a few additional slides. Sarah?
Yeah, hi. So I'll talk through kind of how we operationalize this with such a large scope of a project. Obviously, we had a lot of kids to reach. So there were two ways that families could receive benefits, either through direct issuance or an application. Because all SNAP children are directly certified for free and reduced lunch, the assumption that was made was that this population was eligible for P-EBT, and we directly issued benefits to SNAP recipients between the ages of 5 and 18 as of March 2020. So those went on to their existing EBT cards. The benefits for this population were distributed in May, and we were able to reach over 1.3 million children during this phase alone, and that totaled over 381 million in benefits. And one of the lessons learned that we had from this first initial phase, the direct issuance, was, we did not notify these existing households directly of the P-EBT benefit. We had put out some press releases and communication through the schools, but we did not send like an individual notice to each SNAP household that received this benefit. So there was a little bit of confusion because, as we all know, there were some additional supplements in May. So, we'll talk through some communication strategies that we learned after, but that was definitely a lesson learned for us. We could have probably saved ourselves a little confusion there. As far as the application process goes, we decided to go with an application because none of the agencies, the 3 state agencies, the Texas Education Agency, the Department of Agriculture, or Health and Human Services, had collected mailing addresses or parent information for all free and reduced eligible children. So that was the main reason we decided to have families submit an application if they weren't already enrolled in SNAP. So the application data provided that the parent or head of household would fill out the application. So this included eligible SNAP recipients under 5 and over 18 if they weren't captured in that direct issuance phase. The estimated population we were trying to reach during this application process was 2.3 million children, and we had the application open from June 1st until August 21st. It was originally supposed to only be open for through the month of June, but we extended the application twice, actually, once through July and then again through August. And through that additional extension, when we realized we weren't able to reach as many families as we were hoping, we reached an additional 300,000 plus children through those additional extensions. So it was a great decision, I think, that we made as a state. And once the applications were filled out, we were able to confirm the eligibility of the applicants by matching the application data against school data provided by both the Texas Education Agency and the Department of Agriculture. And so the Texas Education Agency provided us with the school data for public schools, and the Department of Agriculture just provided us with the data for private schools. So one of our biggest problems, I think, that or challenges that we faced was that some of the data did not match from the applications to the school provided data. And so that was approximately 20% of all of the children who applied resulted in what we called an exception. And that resulted in about 400,000 exceptions that needed to be manually processed. The main reasons for the mismatch were oftentimes spelling errors, incorrect date of birth, middle names used as last names, things like that. So that's why we tried to go through manually and fix some of these errors by contacting each household and really try to get through and fix the mismatched data. So during the busiest period in June, when we were processing applications, we processed between 16,000 and 33,000 exceptions daily. I think a peak day was about 60,000 exceptions processed. So part of our lessons learned for this part was definitely some updates to the application, and our matching algorithm would allow for less mismatches. And I think moving forward, that's something we're really trying to focus on is how can we clean up this process that we had. So if through the process of matching against the school list, we still were not able to find a match for this student, we would have issue a denial letter, and with the language that people could submit a complaint if they thought they were denied an error. We received 34,000 plus complaints for manual review, again through HHSC's eligibility staff. And through this manual review, we were able to determine that 51% of these complaints submitted were eligible for P-EBT. We either sent them back to the schools to do a closer review with the student data lists, or if the students or the families were able to provide us a proof of enrollment via an award letter through the National School Lunch Program or something like that, we were able to determine that 51% were actually eligible and were able to issue benefits to those children. A lesson learned here is, again, I think a communication challenge is a large driver of our complaints was due to confusion for some of the children being not eligible for P-EBT, but they received meals through their schools via another program that maybe wasn't NSLP. And I think that, part of the new guidance in including some of these daycare programs will really help clear that up for us as some of the confusion that clients and customers had. So I will turn it back over to Bill to talk through kind of our final outcomes and communication strategies.
Thank you, Sarah. As part of our operational plan, we knew we needed to stand up a separate customer call center. As I started our presentation, talked about some of the historic volumes of applications, due to the pandemic and the economic impact. So our call centers were already, at peak times and rates of wait times. And so we knew by potentially adding an additional 1 million+ applicants with questions, we did not want to overload our system. So we stood up a separate call center, staffed it with up to 300 agents at our peak time during June and July. On the peak days would answer close to 20,000 calls. We also, at the urging and working with our advocate agencies, that we did accept P-EBT applications by phone through that call center. So if there were applicants that did not have access to the internet, could apply by phone. Our core strategy to reach families was obviously through targeted messaging and outreach materials. The TEA and TDA provided and executed most of those outreach through letters, flyers, social media, robocalls. All promotional materials were provided both in English and Spanish. And we also, from the very onset, created a comprehensive list of frequently asked questions and posted them on our website so the public could get information quickly regarding the P-EBT project. We had numerous press releases from the governor's office on marketing and bringing attention to this important project and opportunity for the community to apply. As we were going through towards the the last month of the application period and working closely with our partner agencies, we were holding daily calls with our grocery retailers, keeping them updated on the number of applications and the volume of approvals so that they could ensure enough food resources in their inventory, as well as our advocate agencies, partner agencies were on those daily calls to also help with some of the targeted outreach. And one of the things that we did at urging of partner agencies was to put together some heat maps utilizing zip code data to determine where we may not be seeing deeper penetration rates. So in terms of the applications, and we provided that to local school districts, and they were able to, strategically direct communication into those areas. In terms of the final outcomes and totals, we approved $816 million, almost $817 million in additional food benefits for Texas families. Total children that received was 2,865,813. That's almost 80% of our estimated 3.6 million children. 2/3 of eligible non-SNAP children received the benefit, and 96% of the benefits that we distribute have already been spent. A key takeaway from this was, the open communication with our other agencies and community partners was very important. This was an enormous lift for us in Texas, as you can see from the numbers. But with all the agencies working together, including our community stakeholders, we did a lot of media outreach, numerous TV, radio interviews to get the word out. And so we were pleased with the final numbers. Obviously, we'd want to see 100%, but it was good to see that almost $1 billion of benefits out into the community. I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah. She's going to briefly talk about some of the plans for 2021, the challenges that we see with that.
Yeah, so the challenges that we see for P-EBT 2.0 in 2021 are very similar to what our other states, West Virginia and Massachusetts, have already spoken towards. We don't have, in the spring, we had a 100% closure rate for schools, so we were able to, simplify that assumption of estimating how many kids could receive the benefits. Now our schools are doing different remote model or different hybrid models of remote, in person, 100% virtual. And in Texas, it's extremely challenging because we have 1,200 plus public school districts just for the public school, and then we also have to include our private schools as well. So going down to the more granular district level is going to be quite challenging because there's currently no roll-up at the state agency level to know the individual child's attendance data or anything like that. So we're still working through some of those simplifying assumptions, and obviously we'll need to update our systems with some of the lessons learned we established throughout this spring process. So yeah, I think that's what we're trying to do. We're still working through our state plan, but we have full confidence we can get there.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for that fabulous presentation. And it's great to see the impact by the numbers in Texas and to see what P-EBT means for families in the state. And of course, thank you to the rest of our speakers. This was a very informative hour on P-EBT, and also appreciate all the attendees' patience with our tech issues. Before we close out, I did want to highlight a few resources, and hopefully you can see the slide on the documentation project that we have put together to help your efforts as you think about the next phase for P-EBT. Over the past summer, FRAC and the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities conducted a rapid assessment project to document the development and implementation of P-EBT benefits covering the spring of 2020. The project identified various approaches state took to implement P-EBT, as well as key preliminary lessons state officials and other stakeholders have learned. And we have developed quite a number of products from this project, many of which I think will be helpful as you think about your plans for this school year. First, our joint report, Lessons from Early Implementation of Pandemic EBT. That includes many of the lessons learned that our speakers mentioned, as well as a few more and best practices we identified. We also have a detailed report of the project, as well as eight state case studies, and think they will be really helpful to states as you think through your plans, including one of our presenters today, Texas. 52 individual state profiles on what every state's P-EBT program looked like. And then finally, our P-EBT resource library. As part of this project, we tried to gather up as much information as possible, including communications states used to spread the word about P-EBT. I know we have samples from all of our presenters here, troubleshooting mechanisms, applications, and much more. We've created a searchable database with all these resources and encourage you to check it out. It's searchable by state, stakeholder type of resource, as well as language. And we at FRAC are in the process of finalizing additional resources, including an updated communications toolkit, and we'll share that once available. I know many of our co-hosts are also creating additional resources, and we'll be sure to share those once they're released. We'll also be hosting additional webinars over the next few months and hope you can join us. And I see a few questions in the box. A recording of this webinar will be available along with the slides, and we'll send it to all registrants in a follow-up email in the next few days. And since it is the end of our time, please include your answers in the chat. I know we're not able to get to all of them, but we will be following up with a Q&A document afterwards. And thank you to all those that submitted questions via our Google form over the past few days, and that so USDA could answer those questions during their time. So again, thank you so much. Again, as I said before, we'll be sending a follow-up email with all this information. And a big thank you to all of our presenters for their fabulous presentations and just taking the time to share their expertise with us today. And we look forward to working with all of you to ensure that all eligible families have access to P-EBT this school year. We hope everyone has a great day, and thank you.
Very good. On behalf of the Food Research and Action Center, I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today and for your participation. We'd also like to thank our presenters for sharing their expertise. At this point, we ask that you complete the brief survey that you'll see on your screen. We appreciate your feedback. Again, thank you very much for joining. We hope you have a great afternoon.